Okay, welcome again. This is Youth on the Way, and Father DiTomo here,
And
and
Katie Pyles, youth
yeah,
minister.
and at St. Gall and Katie. We talked about different ideas for different videos we could do, and this video we talked about how we're talking about when we were young, and our experience of the church, good and bad. And so you might look at us and think, there's two people. You guys work in the church. You probably were always faithful. You were probably always heavily involved in the church. Not necessarily the case. At least you'll see. Um, so I figured I'd kind of give a little bit of my insight first. I am. We're different generations, so I would have been in high school in the early '90s to mid '90s. So just if you think back in your mind, imagine me with longer hair, like maybe a Nirvana shirt on, a flannel or something like that. It was grunge '90s. Um, for me, what I would say in thinking about the church, I was confirmed, of course, and I don't remember a lot about my. That was probably my big. I didn't go to Catholic school, so that was my experience as a young person with a parish. Was kind of my confirmation prep, and um, I don't know. It didn't leave much an impression on me. I remember there was a girl in my class that I thought was cute, and I was trying to impress her. That was like my memory of everything. But I think for the main thing for me in high school was last week you talked about where are the passions of the youth are, and for me my passion was in my sports. It was in running. I was in cross country and track. It was sort of the sport I was good at. I was fast, and I dedicated all of my time and attention to it. Also, class studies a little bit too. But that and my friends were on my team. They were my track team, my cross country team. My family, we went to mass. Certainly, we went to mass just about every Sunday. But my universe was running, was trying to be the best runner I could be, hang out with my friends who did the same thing. So that was my passions, and I think my experience of the church was that they just didn't get me. They didn't get on my radar. Whether that was my fault or the church's fault or both, whatever. That's kind of how it was, and so I would say that I kind of came back to the church, and the church became much more important to me when I was in college. And at the end of my college time, I had kind of a return to the faith. I had a reversion where I started thinking about what the purpose of life is, and that's how I engaged in the church. But now looking back at it, I can say to myself, I would have liked to have had the church there when I was younger to give me some balance, because I didn't really have any balance. If I didn't do well in a race, I felt down the whole week. My whole value was sort of placed on how well I did with running.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of time, doing workouts, and it was kind of idolatrous. It was almost like I put way too much attention on it. It was the center of my universe, where God should be is where that was. So that's my story. Not a great story. But the church just didn't grab me when I was that age. And so I think back on that. How about yourself?
Yeah, I was very similar, not with sports so much, but competitive cheerleading. That was
Mm-hmm.
my version of that. I did, that was part of my family culture. Both my sisters cheered, so it was like,
Mm-hmm.
and I am very candid with how obsessed with my sisters I am and was. But so that was kind of where I put all of my energy into this idea that perfection is a thing that can be measured and can be performed.
Mm.
And so I was lucky that I had people who sort of like reached out in that like tender time of middle school, high school. And I was in high school in the aughts, so like 2004, 2005 was my first year of high school. So if you can picture people wearing two polos with both the collars popped at the same time.
Nice.
That was the kind of fashion.
And you had some kind of smartphone in early form, maybe?
Yeah, I had the NV2. It was a green.
Okay.
It slid. It was super cool.
Because I had a payphone that I used.
Yeah.
That's what I used. I did the payphone flip on.
Yeah, no payphones for me. Yeah, so I had really good friends who invited me into youth ministry events, and then that experience, it helped me to understand the value of rest, and like you were saying, balance. And these are kind of like buzzwords we use to talk about the Lord and to talk about our faith, but the three things that I think of that the church provided for me as a young person was freedom, peace, and joy.
freedom, peace, and joy.
Yeah, freedom, peace, and joy. And so those things, they're more than just like, I couldn't perform to get those things. I had to just receive them from the Lord and from my community. And so that was, I benefited from a vibrant youth ministry program and people who were invested in not just me and what I could do for them, but me as a person and my overall well-being and holiness. So I had great mentors, and I think that made a lot of difference in my life. I also had parents who were very firm on when you start something, you gotta see it through. So when I started to go to youth ministry things, they kind of pushed me into going to different things. Then it was like, well, this is a thing that you do now. So, so I think having that backbone at home where my parents are like, well, this is important, so let's make time and space for this in your life. That really helped me a lot too. And I think so then seeking after those three things of freedom, peace, and joy, I felt a certain freedom to be myself, and that gave me the peace and the joy that I longed for. And it just helped me to be better integrated as a person, so that when I went off to college and I had my falling away experiences and, the typical young adult in the church story, I had the tools that I needed and the foundation already laid so that I knew where to go when I wanted to go home. And I knew what home felt like.
Yeah.
And so that overall sense of there's a purpose that I have in my life beyond winning that competition or making that kind of salary or whatever that looks like to people, because I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
But I had been instilled with this idea that my purpose and my life were bigger than what I was able to perform or put out. So that really helped me to know when I was ready to know where home was. So
yeah. And it's kind of interesting too, because although things that we get wrapped up with in school, there's a lot of good about them, and they are important. You can learn a lot from them and have fun. But it is funny that I never run now. I'm out of shape. I don't run. I'm like a mere shadow of what I used to do when I was in shape. And I learned a lot from running, but it was my universe back then, and now it's a memory, and like you don't cheer, I'm assuming, anymore.
No,
okay.
Not even in private.
But maybe for your children, maybe.
Yeah, I do. Cheer. Sometimes we do little cheers at home.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. But so it's funny
perfect,
that the things that we are, as young people, we can get so tied into, whether it's band or drama, and they're all good things, but they're the center. They could be the center of your attention while you're going through it. But then years later, you'll look back and you'll say, okay, that was one thing, but boy, maybe I would have liked to have had more time for friendship, and even for prayer and for faith, and because you're always going to need to relate to the Lord. I mean, you're always going to need to pursue those questions of what's my purpose and how can I get through the day and the strength I need. So.
I will say that being in college and trying to figure out my place in the church, that was very difficult. And so actually, when I was reflecting on this for this video, I was thinking about, I was in college and I was at a parish that wasn't like our campus chapel. It was I was just out at a daily mass, and I had my phone out with the readings, and an older gentleman behind me was very angry that I had my phone out at mass, and so I remember that feeling of being totally misunderstood. Like, there is no place for me here. The music's bad. Nobody understands me when I'm just trying to read scripture and I'm trying to do the right things, and just that total discouragement. But it was, again, people reaching out and inviting me back in and looking at me and seeing me and saying, like, yeah, I mean, you might feel that way, and that's okay. We all do, but, you belong here. There's a place for you here. And if you don't see it, maybe that's the Lord giving you a mission of something to restore to the church. So. Yeah,
it makes me think. I had a similar story with my parents. When I was drifting away in college, they would invite me to mass. Like, I'd come home for break or whatever. They'd say, "Hey, Dad and I are going to mass. Do you want to come with us?" And I would go because they invited me. So, I mean, for parents who might think that, and that was my faith. I did have that same sense of I knew I had a home I could go back to, even though it still lacked something when I was a kid. But so those invitations are good, and also just we should think about how we are towards other people in the church, right? I mean, if that man had looked at you and smiled, you probably would have had a different experience versus looking at you and giving you a stink face because you have a phone, you
Yeah.
know, and he doesn't think that's right. But
Angrily whispering about me throughout
Yeah.
the whole mass, and I was like, "Sir, maybe you should pay attention to Jesus."
that's
But,
right.
you know,
That's right.
I'm
So,
clearly over it. Not
of course,
It's
there's
not
no
bothering me
wounds
at
at
all.
all there.
Yeah.
No. So good. Anything
Yeah.
else?
No, I think
Okay.
that's all I have.
So
to
being
say.
young in the church, we're going to keep thinking about it. If you have a thing you'd like us to talk about, a topic or whatever, something we could bring up, we will do that. So in the meantime, God bless.
So long.
Say something at the end so this is not
Okay.
as awkward.
I can't think of anything.
You don't edit, and there's only one take for all of these.
Raw footage.